I'm so happy you made it. You do want to study with me today? Yeah? Okay. So today I could teach you about the muscular system. It's very interesting. So there are 3 different types of muscle tissue. The first one is skeletal, visceral, muscle, the smooth, and cardiac. So, did you know that the skeletal muscle makes up 40% of the body weight? Like, that's crazy. It makes up 40% of body weight. And this means is that it forms more than 600 muscles. Yeah, that's a lot. Attached to the bones of the skeleton. So muscle is attached to the bones of the skeleton. So under conscious, you are voluntarily controlled, right? So conscious, voluntary control. When the skeletal muscle contracts, it moves bones. And an example of this would be exhibited on your facial expressions, right? So like when you get mad at me, and you typically frown your eyebrows, right? So you're consciously, voluntarily controlling that. And when you're happy with me, you smile, and you also consciously, voluntarily control your smile. Now, let me tell you about some characteristics of the skeletal muscle. So there is excitability. This is the ability to receive and respond to a stimulus from the nervous system. Sorry about that. I just got a notification that my professor graded my assignment. And guess what? I got hundreds. Okay, but it's all due thanks to your help. So, thank you. Shall we go back? Okay, like you were saying, characteristics of the skeletal muscle, which are known to be excitability. This is the ability to be able to receive, respond to a stimulus from where? The nervous system, correct? Okay, then there's also contractility. This is the ability to shorten or to contract. And when you are able to shorten and contract, then this is producing movement. Okay, then there is extensibility. This is just being able to stretch or extend. Extensibility. So the skeletal muscles are often arranged in what we know as opposing pairs, right? So an example of this would be when one muscle contracts, another muscle relaxes and is stretched. So I would just say, just remember that they are in opposing pairs, and you'll be good. Then we have elasticity. This is the ability, the capacity to recoil, return back to the original shape or length after contraction or an extension. So, like we said, continue. We have muscle contraction fulfills four functions in the body to produce movement, posture, and joint stability, and heat production. Heat production is 85% of the heat produced in the body as a result from muscle contraction. Now we know why we sweat a lot when we work out. When we lift weights, we are contracting our muscles a lot, right? And that's why we sweat a lot. Now I know. Yeah, pretty crazy. The structure of skeletal muscle, that's like the whole skeletal muscle, okay? So I might butcher all these names, but hopefully you understand. Epimysium, that is the connective tissue sheath that surrounds the muscle. So we know this because epi means on or upon, right? Epi. So the connective tissue sheath that surrounds the muscle, it's on or upon. Then we have fascia. This is the connective tissue outside the epimysium. It surrounds and separates muscle. So I don't know how we could remember this, but probably like looking at a picture. But if I were to be explaining it to somebody who couldn't be able to see, I would just say fascia is like the face. It's on the outside of everything, of epimysium. So I would just say a connective tissue outside that separates and surrounds muscles. Pretty easy, huh? It's because you have the best teacher here. Okay, the third one is called fasciculus. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Those are just bundles of muscle fibers. So, fasciculus, just remember that lus is a lot. So, bundles of muscle fibers. Okay, then we have the perimysium. The perimysium is a fibrous connective tissue that surrounds the fasciculus. So the perimysium surrounds the bundle of muscle fibers. It's peri, around, protecting, right? And then we have muscle fibers, of course. Muscle fiber is each individual muscle cell. Okay, muscle fiber. So every fiber has a muscle cell. Then we have endomysium. Endo, we know that is something that is connective tissue that surrounds an individual muscle fiber known as a cell. So endo would be inside, right? So next to the muscle fiber, the cell to surround it. That was not a fart, by the way. I just moved my legs. Okay, let's go back. Now let me talk to you about the skeletal muscle fibers. So each skeletal muscle fiber consists of a single cylindrical muscle cell. So we know skeletal muscle fibers have some individual cells, right? And if they're individual, that means that they consist of a single cylindrical muscle cell. I don't know, but I do remember saying that cylindrical is like they reproduce, they're dividing, right? So like that's what I'm going with. I don't know if it's right, but they're single cylindrical muscle cells. Then we have the sarcolemma. The sarcolemma is the cell membrane, like the plasma membrane, but cell membrane of muscle fiber cell. And then we have the sarcoplasm, like the cytoplasm, but this is sarcoplasm, so it's the cytoplasm of a muscle fiber cell. This is like very interesting to me. I don't know if it's to you, but my bestie, and I know you like listening to me. Okay, the next one is sarcoplasm. Sarcoplasmic reticulum, excuse me. This is a specialized form of smooth endoplasmic reticulum in the muscle fibers that store calcium. So sarcoplasmic reticulum has a specialized smooth endoplasmic reticulum, ER, in muscle fibers storing calcium. And calcium is essential. It's necessary for muscle contractions. It's very important, right? So sarcoplasmic, remember egg, calcium. Calcium also has, okay. Then we have multiple nuclei. This is next to sarcolemma at periphery of cell. So multiple nuclei next to the sarcolemma at periphery of cell. Then we have the numerous mitochondria because muscle cells need energy for contraction. We also need numerous mitochondria. Then we have T-tubules. T-tubules are multiple inward extensions of the sarcolemma. Do you remember what the sarcolemma was? It's the cell membrane of the muscle fiber. Correct. So these T-tubules are multiple inward extensions of the sarcolemma, the cell membrane. Then we have nerve and blood supply. The skeletal muscles are abundant supply of blood vessels and nerves. So skeletal muscles are abundant supply of blood vessels and nerves. Okay, they are directly related to the function of skeletal muscle contraction. Before a skeletal muscle can contract, it must receive an impulse from a nerve cell. So before a skeletal muscle fiber can contract, it has to receive an impulse from a nerve cell. So muscle contraction requires adenosine triphosphate, known as ATP. Wait, I don't really think you need to be saying adenosine triphosphate every time. We could just call it ATP. But I did one time, I remember, for my bio class, when we were taking an exam, and it said, what does ATP stand for? So I would just know it's adenosine triphosphate, but you don't have to say the whole name every time. Just say ATP. But do know the name of it. Blood vessels deliver nutrients and oxygen to produce ATP. Blood vessels deliver nutrients and oxygen. Remember that. They also remove waste products produced as a result of muscle contraction. So they deliver nutrients and oxygen, making ATP. And they remove waste as a result of muscle contraction. Okay, now skeletal muscle attachments. there are direct attachments. These are fibers of the epimysium. Remember, epi means like above or upon? I mean above, not above. On or upon. Epimysium. They fuse directly with the periosteum hormone of the bone. Periosteum. They are direct attachment. So the epimysium fuses with the periosteum of the bone. The indirect attachment is the epimysium, perimysium, and the endomysium. They extend beyond the belly, the muscle, forming a thick, rope-like tendon, or also a broad, flat, sheet-like bone, known as aponeurosis. Aponeurosis. Hopefully I'm saying that right. So, direct attachment is fibers of the epimysium with the periosteum of the bone. Remember, O for bone. And then reacts with perimysium, epimysium, endomysium, forming thick rope-like tendons, which are broad, flat, sheet-like, and aponeurosis. Typically, muscles span a joint, okay? So typically, muscles span a joint, attached to bones by tendons at both ends. So, muscles attached to bones by tendons, which are at both ends. The origin is the end of the muscle that is attached to a relatively immovable part. Origin meaning immovable, it cannot move. Insertion is also at the end, but it is movable. So origin is at the end, but is immovable. Right? It's the origin, it doesn't move. And then there's insertion. That means it's also at the end of the other end, and it's movable. Insertion, meaning you can move it around, right? Now let's talk a little bit about stimulus for contraction. There are motor neurons that stimulate skeletal muscles to contract. Motor neurons. Motor means movement. And when there's movement, there has to be contraction. So motor neurons stimulate skeletal muscles to contract. The axon of motor neurons penetrates this muscle. So axon of motor neurons penetrate the muscle. Axon branches are axon terminals for each muscle fiber. So there are axon branches and the axon terminals for each muscle fiber. Let's talk about motor neurons. Motor units. Units are a single motor neuron and all the muscle fibers to stimulate. A motor unit is a single motor neuron and all the muscle fibers it stimulates. Some motor neurons include several hundreds of fibers. Others contain fewer than 10. So they all just vary. And then we have neuromuscular junction. It's a region in which an axon terminal meets a muscle fiber. So neuromuscular junction, just remember it's a combination of axon terminal meeting the muscle fiber. The axon terminal does not touch the sarcolemma. Remember what sarcolemma is? Correct. didn't even know or remember it that fast. It's the cell membrane of the muscle fiber. You're doing so good. So like we said, the axon terminal does not touch the sarcolemma of the muscle fiber. It fits into a shallow depression of a cell membrane. The synaptic clip is a fluid-filled space between the axon terminal and the sarcolemma. And so this is how we know that the axon terminal doesn't touch the sarcolemma because of the synaptic clip. It's a space between these two. And what was released is acetylcholine, also known as ACH. It's a neurotransmitter. It's contained within the synaptic vesicles and the axon terminals. So the ones who release the acetylcholine neurotransmitters are the axon terminals, and they are released into the synaptic clip, going afterwards into the sarcolemma. These are receptor sites for acetylcholine and are located on the sarcolemma. So when a nerve impulse reaches the axon terminal, acetylcholine is released, and it is then diffused across the synaptic clip, and they bind with receptor sites on the sarcolemma. This reaction is the stimulus for contraction. The stimulus meaning a change in a cellular environment, altering, of course, the cell membrane. So stimulus is a cellular environment altering the cell membrane. Acetylcholine binding with the receptor sites. So this is the stimulus that occurs. Acetylcholine binding with receptor sites. The stimulus causes a response in a muscle impulse that travels in all directions of the sarcolemma. Then the muscle impulse travels into the T-tubules. Remember? They initiate a psychological activity within the muscle cell that then results in contraction. At the synaptic clip, acetylcholine is rapidly inactivated due to the enzyme of acetylcholine esterase. So just remember, ACE means that something that breaks down. So we know this because they rapidly inactivated, meaning ACE, acetylcholine esterase. Why does this even happen, you might ask? Well, it's to ensure that one nerve impulse will result in only one impulse, only one contraction of the muscle fiber. Because imagine you're kicking a ball, like a soccer ball, and that nerve impulse does not have the enzyme acetylcholine esterase, then what do you think would happen? You're going to kick the ball, you're going to try to kick it more than one time, or even with a lot of force, which is not good. And we need this enzyme of that acetylcholine esterase to ensure that we are only moving one muscle impulse and one contraction of the muscle fiber. Now, do you want me to continue, or should we stop? It's all up to you, really. This is all really interesting to me, personally, but do you want to take a short break? Alright, it's fine with me. So, what do you want to talk about? Me? You want me to start the combo? Okay. Let's see. How was your day? I'm pretty sure you were busy, even though you say you didn't really do much today. But come on, don't be so harsh on yourself. You've been studying too. You've been working as well. I'm really proud of you, you know that, right? You sit down and you listen to me talk about my biology and anatomy and things. You're amazing. What can I ask for? I know, but sometimes life does get rough. But we always have to look at the plus side, the positive. We're all humans. We came to this earth to live life. And we gotta face the fact that life isn't always going to be one big rainbow. Happy smiles every time. Like, there are changes that need to be taken place of, you know? Because without these changes, we wouldn't evolve. We wouldn't be who we are today. You wouldn't be satisfied. I know you wouldn't. You know, like that one song from Hamilton. You would never be satisfied. I love that song. You know, I used to sing it to my brothers, like every single day. Like, I still remember. It was so funny. Like, I would wake up, like maybe on a Saturday, because I wouldn't do that during school, because we would wake up early to go to school. But like when it's like Saturday and we wake up like around 12, not 12, what am I even saying? Like around probably 11 the latest. Okay? 11 a.m. I would be like, I'm toast to the groom, to the groom, to the groom, to the bride, from your sister, that's always by your side. It was so funny. And then he'd be like, oh my god, here she goes again. It was so funny, all those days. I was in high school, I believe. High school, middle school, I don't remember. But I still remember it, like, just remembering those moments makes me tear up. Like I said, it's not always going to be smiles, because sometimes we do fight with our siblings. But you could always have those beautiful moments and remember them. Right? You grow. You get to learn more about them once you grow up more. Yeah. Well, I know you're doing good. And we're just living life. And life has errors. It has its ups and downs. Don't go too harsh on yourself, man. Like, for real, like, just try to relax. And I know sometimes it might be hard to relax. And it might get, like, very hectic and anguish, frustration. But just repeat to yourself that you're not the only one. There are others that are going through tougher things, you know. And that's what usually calms me down. Like, I just start thanking the universe and God. Thank them for giving me all these beautiful moments and allowing me to live life. Sorry, I kind of deviated there. Shall we go back? Now let's talk about energy sources and oxygen debit. So ATP, like I said, is the source of energy for muscle contraction, right? Because we need energy to contract, to move. Because energy typically comes from food, nutrition, right? So if we stop eating, we're not going to make ATP. And if there's no ATP, that's why we can't move a lot when we don't eat. We need our food, okay? So don't forget to eat. Always eat. Just moderately, okay? So muscles have limited storage facilities for ATP. There is a limit. This is why we have to limit ourselves as well when eating, because we cannot store all this food to make ATP energy. Some of this food gets stored into different places known as, we're getting chubby. Yes, sadly. They stored ATP and it depleted in 6 seconds. New ATP must be regenerated. ATP regenerates and it is stored and it depleted in 6 seconds. Creatine phosphate is a high energy compound stored in muscles. You know, now I know why, like, a lot of people who work out, well, I used to see, like, on TikTok or something, I remember it's TikTok or YouTube, one of those two, that they would drink creatine. But now that I know that it's because it's a high energy compound that is stored in the muscles making it grow, that's why some of them would drink creatine phosphate. However, there are others who don't take anything and they do it clean way. I mean, beats me, but yeah, I don't know the side effects of that. Hopefully they're not that bad, right? But they are chemicals, so who knows? Maybe looking more into depth about creatine phosphate taking. I'm not really knowledgeable on this section about taking creatine and supplements for muscles. But hopefully they just grow and they cause no harm. Hopefully. I don't know, I'd have to look into it. They provide an instantaneous transfer of its energy. So creatine phosphate is a high energy compound stored in muscles, providing an instantaneous transfer of its energy. It provides a phosphate group to adeno ADP. ADP, meaning 2 molecules to generate ATP. So creatine phosphate plus ADP makes creatine plus ATP. So let's make a little scenario. You drink creatine plus give it a group known as ADP. You make creatine plus energy, meaning ATP. The reaction is so effective that very little change to ATP levels during initial stages. Very little change in ATP levels during initial stages of muscle contraction. The reaction is effective, let's just say that. Because some things are so wordy in this slide. When ATP levels are high, this reaction is reversed to form more creatine phosphate. I'm guessing this happens like when they overexceed their limit on creatine, right? So when ATP levels are high, the reaction is reversed and more creatine phosphate is made. The muscles store enough creatine phosphate to regenerate sufficient ATP to sustain contraction for about 10 seconds. Okay, do not get confused with this section that says that the ATP is depleted in 6 seconds. With muscle is stored with enough creatine phosphate to regenerate ATP and maintain a contraction for about 10 seconds. So it's depleted for 6 seconds and contracted for 10 seconds. When muscles are actively contracting for extended periods of time, fatty acids or glucose become the primary energy sources. So do you know, I also heard that people work out like 3 hours. Not to be one of those, but there was a time when I would work out for 2 hours. Not 3, huh? I never got to 3 hours. That's a little bit too much now for me. But 2 hours, right? Okay, let's talk about 3 hours. They like stimulate the contraction of muscles. So they're breaking down more fatty acids and glucose. That's why they lose a lot of weight, like fat. It's pretty dangerous because you're actively contracting it for a long period of time. But like, apart from that, isn't like tiring working out that much? Like, I would get tired for 2 hours. Like, I just can't imagine 3 hours. Especially if you're like lifting. But maybe, taking breaks in between. Because of course you're not going to be like non-stop, continuous, like back-to-back workouts, right? You like rest for like a minute or 2 in between sets, right? So, I don't really think it's that bad if you take breaks. Okay, so fatty acids and glucose become primary energy sources. They are present in blood that circulate through the muscles. Glucose is stored in muscles as glycogen. So glucose stored in muscles has a different name. It is now called glycogen. Okay? As the stored ATP and creatine phosphates are being used, more ATP is produced from metabolism of glucose and fatty acids. So as the ATP and the creatine phosphates are being used, more ATP is produced due to the metabolism and glucose of fatty acids. If an adequate oxygen is available, fatty acids and glucose are broken down in the mitochondria by a process known as aerobic respiration. Okay, so aerobic and then there is anaerobic. Aerobic meaning it's oxygen, it needs it, and anaerobic means it doesn't need oxygen. However, fatty acids and glucose are broken down in the mitochondria via a process known as aerobic respiration. And products are carbon dioxide, water, and a large amount of ATP. Small amounts of oxygen can be stored in red muscle fibers because how we know that hemoglobin transfers of oxygen, right? So red muscle fibers has blood as well, so remember that. Red fibers contain myoglobin, which is an iron-containing protein in the sarcoplasm, like the cytoplasm, the gel of muscle cells. They contain an iron protein. Temporarily binds with oxygen and stores it, giving muscle its red color. Remember? When oxygen levels inside a muscle fiber diminish or decreases, the oxygen can be resupplied from myoglobin. So your oxygen levels go down in the muscle fibers, the oxygen is resupplied from myoglobin. I probably would want to look up what myoglobin is, right? I mean, we're learning at the same time. Myoglobin is a small iron-binding oxygen storing protein found in the vertebrae of the heart and skeletal muscle. So it's basically just like the iron-binding oxygen storing hemoprotein. So, yeah. When muscles are contracting vigorously for a long period of time, myoglobin and the circulatory system are unable to deliver oxygen fast enough to maintain aerobic pathways. So processes do not require oxygen are necessary. So when the myoglobin and circulatory system are vigorously going on for a long period of time, they are not able to deliver oxygen fast enough to maintain aerobic pathways. And that is true because when we're working out, we're like going like, right? Okay, so the processes that do not require oxygen are also necessary. These are known as anaerobic, right? Anaerobic respiration. Okay, so glucose is broken down by anaerobic respiration. These are products of the anaerobic pathway. And this is what causes lactic acid and a small amount of ATP, meaning energy. We become so lazy and all that, right? Like, not lazy. What do we call that? Gloomy. I don't know how to explain it. But you get me. I know you do. So some lactic acid accumulates in the muscle. And you know that this is what causes that burning sensation. Like, probably it's like the after cramps and all of that. And like how you feel like when you want to go to the toilet and you can't bend down. Yeah, it's from the lactic acid buildup. And that happens when anaerobic respiration goes on. The anaerobic pathway produces 20 times more. The aerobic, the oxygen pathway, produces 20 times more ATP than the anaerobic pathway. For prolonged activities requiring endurance depend on aerobic mechanisms. And like I said previously, you know how I said like those people that typically work out for 3 hours, I do believe that they do take breaks. They don't go back to back because it is needed to endure and keep on going, right? And then for anaerobic pathways, it provides ATP faster than the aerobic pathway. It provides most of the energy for vigorous activity, like in the moment after periods. So it provides most of the energy for vigorous activity. So anaerobic produces more energy, ATP, for prolonged activities. However, anaerobic produces ATP faster, but it's only like for vigorous activities, like really fast at the moment. You can't really endure it for a long time. So after periods of extremist exercise that required an anaerobic mechanism, meaning no oxygen, accumulation of lactic acid in the muscle causes a temporary muscle pain and cramping. Yeah, that did happen to me, even though I didn't work out for a long period of time, but it was out of breath, so probably that's how I built up my lactic acid. ATP and creatine phosphates in the muscles are depleted, meaning they go down, and they are needed to be replenished. Additional oxygen additional oxygen needed to convert lactic acid into glycogen. Probably performing a little bit of yoga afterwards to convert our lactic acid into glycogen, meaning stored, right? Stored in the muscle fiber. So after periods of extraneous exercise, in the anaerobic, we're still talking about anaerobic here, meaning no oxygen needed to replenish ATP and creatine phosphate in the muscle. This creates an oxygen debit that must be repaid before the equilibrium could be restored. And why is it called debit? Because we had made our body not breathe enough, so we took away some, and that's why we're now in an oxygen debit. Oxygen debit is the additional oxygen needed, required after physical activity to restore resting condition. So debit is paid back by labored breathing. That continues after the activity has stopped. That's why it's very important to get our breaks, take a deep breath, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and then go back at it, Perhaps taking a day after, a break afterwards. Now let's talk about movements. Movements. Skeletal muscles are attached to bones by tendons. That's snap joints. So skeletal muscle, bones, by tendons. When the muscle contracts, one bone, meaning the insertion, moves relative to the other bone, which is the origin, which is not movable. Movements. Frequent muscles work in groups. Frequently, muscles work in groups to perform a particular movement. Okay, so let's talk about it. There are prime movers. The muscle that is mainly responsible for a particular body movement. Prime. Responsible, mainly. Then we have a syngerist. Syngerist is a muscle that works within or assists the prime mover to cause a movement. So it works within or assists to the prime mover. Then we have antagonists. Anta means against, right? So muscles that oppose, reverse to a particular movement. Following muscles are on opposite sides of the humerus and have opposite functions are antagonists. So we have the biceps brachia. That is flexes the forearm at the elbow. And then we have the tricep brachii, which extends the forearm at the elbow. So biceps up here, triceps down here, closer to the arm. Oops. Closer to the arms, girl. Whoops. Sorry guys, I'm kind of sleepy. But that's no excuse, right? It's in the back of the triceps. The biceps are in the front. They are in opposing Yes. It's just muscles in the upper arm. that lesson. I just want to say thank you so much for listening to my lesson and learning with me. It's like so much funner when I do it with you. You're just that special.